All right, hey everybody, Dr. Gunyon here. If you're not familiar with me and you're catching on to this, I'm a functional medicine doctor and I have been in the health and wellness space for over 25 years. And today we're going to do a live. And what we're planning on talking about here is I have a few different questions. I have common questions that come in all the time. I take care of a lot of hormone issues, women and men, and so there's always a lot of questions around hormones. A lot of people dealing with hormone issues. There's a lot of frequently asked questions, and so some of the different questions I'm going to ask today, or I'm going to answer today, is that one of them is, how do you test for hormones? Another one is how is your testing different? You know, how is your testing different from what I've done, or what's currently out there to get different results? And then the third question that I got was, what do you do for results? How do you treat irregular hormone levels? Okay, so once you find hormone issues, what do we do? What do we do that's different that gets to the root causes? Okay, so we're going to go through these three questions today. If you catch on here and you do have any other questions, please leave them in the comments, and what we'll do is work back after the live. Plan on going about 15 minutes here, and come back and answer those questions in the comments. You can direct message me as well, or even email us at info@drgunyon.com. That's info at drgunyon.com. You can visit our website at drgunyon.com and figure out and find out some more information if you're looking to get better results or get your hormones tested, understand deeper why things are happening. I mean, that's the purpose, guys. If you're unfamiliar with functional medicine, is that one of the major premises, the purposes of functional medicine, is to investigate the root causes of health challenges, health troubles, why your body's changing. And so that really leads us into really that first question is, how do I test for hormones? And really, how does that compare to what a lot of people have had tested? And typically in the medical world, what's going to happen is that you're going to get blood work when it comes to the hormones. And there is a benefit for this, okay? That getting hormones tested in the blood is quicker. Hospitals, facilities, clinics, they even have their own labs within their facility that they can get your blood drawn and have results by the end of the day tomorrow, right? And that's important to understand, is that when we're looking at medical testing, medicine really is about putting out fires. Okay, so it's more about emergency care, which is totally fine. But we have to have a better understanding of this, is that medical care is more about putting out fires to handle an emergency. Like, think of like a heart attack. Like, if you had a heart attack, you take as much drugs and you do as much surgery as you need to stay alive. And what you got to realize is that that surgery and those drugs did not address why the heart attack happened in the first place. And that's functional medicine, okay? Is understand what are the factors that drove that person's body to change and ultimately lead to an emergency situation, heart attack. But medicine was there at the right time to put out that fire, to save somebody's life. And that can be the same thing with hormones, right? So somebody can be really struggling, and so they go into their doctor and they get some lab work done, and they find that their estrogen is out of range. They find that their progesterone, their testosterone, that these hormones are out of range. And in medicine, again, their tools is medicine, right? So a lot of times what people have is that they get the test done, and if that lab work was out of range, then they get the therapies that are applied to that test, right? So in a medical office, again, the scope of practice is drugs, medicine and surgery, depending on what scope you're looking at, what doctor you're looking at. But across the board, you're seeing some type of medication that's typically done in most medical offices. And so in a hormone situation, what they're going to do is they're going to look at the hormone replacement therapies, from pills to pellets to injections, to creams and patches. And these are their tools to address what they found on those labs. Okay. And what's great, again, about blood work is that you can actually get the results quickly and get implementation done quickly, like meaning a prescription, and get people on a therapy quickly. And that can definitely provide some benefits. But here's the issue here, is that they're looking at the hormones themselves, and that's an incomplete picture when it comes to hormone health. Hormones alone, what we have to look at and test for is that um, there's four different parts of a hormone and hormone development, basically. So number one, you have to be able to produce those hormones. So you have to evaluate the cells that produce the hormonal material. Number two, you have to evaluate how those hormones are transported. Okay, so basically, hormones have to be compartmentalized. Think of it kind of like a school bus. That the hormones have to get on the school bus, and then the school bus takes them to different parts of your body. Okay, and then once they get to different parts of your body, the hormones unload off the school bus and enter into maybe the school, right? So the school bus is taking kids to different schools, taking hormones to different schools, right? And then it has to deliver those hormones into their cells that those hormones are supposed to work with. Okay, and so you have to be able to make the hormones. You have to be able to transport them. You have to be able to use them in the cells that need them, they're required to make these things happen. And then number four is that once you use those hormones, you must be able to metabolize those hormones back out of your body. Okay, so there's a whole sequence, there's a whole life cycle that must take place. And in some ways, kind of think of it like, also, like, I'm always about examples to help you make sense of it all. Is like, like farming, that you have to get the soil ready, you got to plant the seeds, you got to let those crops grow, you got to nurture them, take care of them, and then on the backside of that's the harvest. Once you get done with the harvest, then what do you do is the leftovers need to get, either recycled and or eliminated back off the field, right? So the body's a lot like that. There's a sequence of events that must take place. But when it comes to how do I test for hormones? Well, number one, I'm testing that whole process. Okay, I want to see how each one of those things in that process are working, and not just look at the hormones themselves. And a lot of people are familiar with the testosterone, the estrogen, the progesterone, maybe thyroid hormones. But either way, it has to go through a process, and you need to evaluate that whole process. What I also think of is that when you're looking at hormones, there's also a hierarchy that the adrenals are super important for your hormones, and they're at the top of the food chain. Okay, so anything that stresses your adrenals can change your hormones. And so you got to look at the adrenals, then the sex hormones, then the thyroid hormones, and looking at those four different stages of each one of those hormones. And so you can see that this gets to become very much in depth, but that's what I pride myself on. That's what I think a lot of what you hear functional medicine doctors say is like, it's about getting to the root causes and being very detailed and very thorough about that really there's a reason why your body's changing. There's a reason why those hormones are changing, and we've got to figure that out. And I mean, and that really leads me into the next question, honestly, is that, well, what do I do that's different? Is that understanding that hormones aren't a primary problem, that the hormones are changing for some other reason. Okay, now that's the fact. Unless you've unfortunately had like ovaries taken out, a thyroid taken out, now you definitely got a primary hormone problem, and or maybe you had some of those tissues radiated at some point and really degenerated them and damaged cells. So you could end up having a physical problem within those cells, and that could be more considered of a primary problem. But other than that, what's happening is that hormones are our chemical messengers, and they're being triggered and adapting based off of our environment. Okay, and there's three big things that our bodies are adapting to. There's three stressors: physical, chemical, and emotional. And so each one of those, there's subcategories of each one of those. And what they'll do, those physical, chemical, emotional stressors will cause and drive your body to change and adapt. Okay, so these hormones are going to adapt to that environment. An example that I use a lot with ladies is that, to kind of familiarize this, is that you can look at Olympic level athletes, very professional women athletes, and you can see that some of them push their bodies so far that they lose their cycle. So they've pushed their body so hard and so far that they lose their cycle. And I often say this because we've been taught a lot about how exercise is definitely important. Okay, but exercise can also be a stressor that puts your body past thresholds hormonally that makes it that manipulates your hormones to stay at a level that's unhealthy. Because that's the truth about this scenario in this example is that you got an Olympic athlete lady who you would consider as an extremely healthy person, right? In the perceptions that we've been given about health, that because she exercises, she's an elite level athlete, that she's got to be healthy. But what you got to look at is like reproductively, those sex hormones. What is the primary purpose of those? To reproduce. Okay, sex hormones' and primary purpose is to reproduce. And that woman has pushed her body so hard physically that she is not able to reproduce. Her body's actually expressing that it's so unhealthy that it's not a good time to reproduce, that her body is so stressed, it is not time to reproduce. Okay, I think that that's a wonderful example to see even see that something considered very healthy, like working out and exercise, can actually even be a stressor that causes your hormones to change, let alone the daily life things of, of work, relationships, finances, all the things that can change our emotional states and cause a lot of ups and downs emotionally. We've got a lot of different chemical stressors. That could be, I think, some of the low hanging fruit on this is things like sugar, refined sugar, bad fats, sodas, fast foods. There's this whole laundry list of toxic like food and chemicals around the foods that you can definitely look up. I mean, there's a laundry list of those. And then there's also deeper layers of toxicity. And that's what I was precluding when I'm talking about introducing this live today, is that a big part of hormonal health is actually gut health. And that's because our gut is a big part of our immune system. Okay, so about 80% of the cells that work within in our immune system are found within our gut. And so if you stress and damage the gut, it will definitely have an impact on the hormones. If you look at the stress response, this is why I brought up the three stressors, is you look at physical, chemical, and emotional stressors, that puts us into what's called the sympathetic response, fight or flight. In fight or flight, what that actually does is it shuts down our gut. Now, if you look at this very simply, think of fight or flight like getting chased by a bear, right? So if you're getting chased by a bear, it doesn't matter. It's not important for your body to digest food if you're going to be the food, right? So that's what I mean. It shuts down the gut. But because a huge percentage of your immune system is activated and working within your gut, it actually also suppresses that gut function. So you impact digestion, so you can be slowing down digestion. It allows more toxicities to stay in the body longer. You're shutting down your immune system. This is all a stress response that will have a ripple effect and cascade effect onto your brain, your adrenals, your sex hormones, your thyroid hormones. So there's a cascade of events that take place once that stress response happens. And the more that we stay in that state, like the longer that we get chased by this bear, the more that our body's going to fatigue. Now, see, it's not your body doing the wrong thing. It's that it's just continually having to adapt to that stressful environment. And it can only do that for so long. So initially you're running away from that bear, and now you're starting to fatigue. And if you continually have to run away from that bear, you're going to fatigue totally out and collapse. And then you're going to get eaten, right? And that's where people's bodies really break down. And what you can really start to gain and understand there is that the way that your body was adapting was actually perfect to the stressful environment. It was just that you just had to keep running from that environment. And eventually you can only take it so long before you damage the body, fatigue it out. You can't do anymore. And this is where organ cells and tissues just really shut down. And now we know we have a problem for sure, right? This is these medical emergencies for sure, where, yeah, I have no problem. Like in these scenarios, like you got to get to a facility that's going to help you to get you safe and stable. Okay, that's a lot of times what medical care is for, safe and stability. But then from there, we got to understand that just by doing those treatments, just by taking the medications, doing the surgeries, that it really didn't address the main cause. It just treated the fire. It treated the situation. and it didn't really address why it happened and what was the process that led to it. Okay, and what's this spectrum of function within the body that just because you put out one fire, do you have another fire that's on the verge of just exploding again, like just like the one that just happened. So this is where the functional medicine comes in. So you can start to see already from a application standpoint or a perspective standpoint how when I do testing differently, it's automatically looking that one part of your body can cause problems in other parts of your body. And if we just chase symptoms, hormones, then you can manipulate the hormones through therapies, replacements, but ultimately, and actually you can feel better, right? But ultimately, why did that happen in the first place, right? Why did those hormones change in the first place? And have you investigated the gut and the immune system, the stress response that will cause hormones to change? And so, what I do that's different with hormone testing is actually even comprehensive testing that not only am I looking at the hormones and how they're being produced, how they're being transported, how they're being utilized, and how they're being detoxed out of the body, but also what's driving and causing those hormones to change. Okay, what are the other systems that can do that? Whether it's the immune system, we're gonna keep that tight today because there's just so much to talk about. But for the sake of time, we're already at 16 minutes, and so let's focus on this gut and this immune system, and the stress response will change those hormones. And if you don't address those upstream factors, you can manipulate the hormones all the time. Now they're too low, so you take stuff. Now they're too high, so then you reduce it. And so I see a lot of hormone ping pong is what I call that, because the root causes aren't being addressed. And I want you to start to understand that the gut is a big part of it because of how it's connected to the stress response, the immune system. And when those parts are stimulated, triggered, damaged, it will impact your brain, which sends messages about your hormones and changes your hormones. Okay. There's also testing, like I do a lot of stool testing. Okay. So stool testing is a huge immune system test that shows your microbiome and your immune system, the different factors of microbiology in there. And this is another type of chemical stressor, basically, is that you can have stealth infections in your gut that trigger the stress response, inflammation. It can it can contribute to things like leaky gut, assimilation and digestion absorption issues with your liver, gallbladder, pancreas. And so there's all of these factors that in the gut and the immune system that you can evaluate that then therefore are actually changing the hormones. And if you don't address those, then the hormones you're always playing hormone ping pong. But then also at the same time is like if you don't address the cause, then it just keeps getting worse and worse, right? It's like I was thinking of like a fire in a building in a house that if the alarms are going off because there's an actual fire, so your hormones are off. So if you take the batteries out of the fire alarm, which is like hormone replacement therapy, okay, great. The alarm's not there anymore, but we didn't even address the fire, right? So the fire is back in the other room and you actually don't even see it yet. You don't even know it's there. All you know is the alarms went off. And so if you don't address that fire, then the fire just keeps burning down the building. And that's what I mean by like, if you don't address the root cause, it just keeps getting neglected. It just keeps spreading throughout the body. The neglect factor is what I call that. You can think of it like a garden where if you don't water it and give it the required things that it needs, then it will wilt, right? So that process of wilting is happening, and we haven't been taught that much in our bodies. So when it comes to how do I test different, I mean, that alone, we're looking at different factors that cause the hormones to change. When I'm looking at the hormones, I'm looking at all 4 stages of hormone development. I do a lot of testing through the urine. Now, the urine shows us metabolites of those hormones, which means that they're the breakdown products of hormone production and usage. And this is very important because it also gives us a chance to look at hormone metabolism and how things are. I hate the word detox, to be honest, but basically being biotransformed would be the better term there. But we do, once we have produced and used hormones, we do need to eliminate them back out of the body. And if you don't have a great elimination process, then you can be storing those toxins, those hormones in your body. And hormones like estrogen, testosterone, these are anabolic hormones. That means that they build tissues. Anabolic means to build tissue. And so that's where you can get into issues of like breast tumors, ovarian cysts, endometriosis. It could look like heavy periods and cycles, And for men, it could be prostate problems. It could be, cysts on testicles, growth on testicles, anabolic building hormones. Okay. So it might not even be an issue of yet you're producing too much, so to speak. It might be a factor of that you're not eliminated out of the body, the leftover materials of metabolism out of the body. And so it's like a plugged sink where you're not getting the water out, right? So it's filling up, and it has to go somewhere, and so it can be a contributing factor to building tissues. Also, on a stool test, something that comes to mind too is there's something called beta glucuronidase. Okay, this is an enzyme that can affect the detoxification process of toxins, but also sex hormones like estrogen. That you can basically think your toxins are put into packages to be eliminated out of your body, and that beta glucuronidase, when it's high, can actually open up those packages and allow recirculation of toxins and hormones like estrogen, and ultimately be another factor of why your hormones are not working well, or they're not within range, or you're struggling with symptoms, right? So I hope you're starting to understand that there's a lot more detail than probably you've been told or even been tested for. I hope that I'm coming into some clarity. You're getting some clarity on the fact is that when I'm testing hormones again, is that it's not just about the hormones and what levels that they're at very simply. There's the factors that are causing them to change, that there's different sequences of events that must take place for hormones themselves, and that it's possible. Okay, a lot of times people have never even heard of functional medicine, and then they'll say that there's a whole spectrum of functional medicine practitioners that don't all practice or operate in their clinics the same way. Okay, so a big reason why I do the way that I do it is because, I mean, again, I've got 25 years of experience that started out in exercise physiology and kept graduating and graduating into neurology, spinal anatomy, spinal correction, neurology, some more. And when my wife got sick, we found functional medicine because, again, the traditional approaches were just treatments and not getting to the root causes. And we had a little bit more in-depth wisdom and understanding to keep seeking. But it was also a big eye-opening experience for us, because I was a doctor at the time. She's a nutritionist. And even with all the experience and application that we lived very healthy lifestyles. She ended up with a major infection from mold toxicity that was never talked about in any medical facility. And that's what led us to functional medicine. But it took us some time. Even in functional medicine, we had to figure it out. We had some insight. I met some functional medicine doctors. We got some insight, but ultimately their vision or their comprehensiveness of testing was limited. And so we had to keep evolving ourselves. And thank God we already had a huge background in health and wellness in order to do that. But it took my wife 3 years to recover. But ultimately, what I'm trying to say here is that's always been, since then, it's always been my leg up, where it's always been my benefit, that test of working through that, learning on the fly, being scared, to help her overcome this big time immune system challenge that had a mold toxicity component to it. It's always been my advantage for perspective on helping people, to how to put this all together, to explain it and hit all of the levels of what we need to be addressing and looking at. So, that sometimes when your biggest tests become your biggest testimonies, that's definitely our life. And it's been a big blessing, not in the moments when it was happening, of course, but it's been a big, huge blessing being able to serve and help a lot of people because of it. And that's why I'm here tonight, okay, and giving you this perspective. So what I've covered so far, guys, we're going to come back through this. I'm definitely it's kind of going longer than I expect. But what we talked about, we were talking about how do we test for hormones? Like, what do we do? What am I doing that's different? Giving you a lot of perspective on that. Understand the comprehensiveness is super important, that the hormones themselves aren't just the problem, okay? There's other factors that are causing those hormones to change. And without that complete picture, you're going to be lost, okay? You're going to be in the dark. It's so many different factors. The last question was, what do you do for results? How do you treat irregular hormones? What do you do? Well, by addressing these upstream factors, these other places in the body through the physical, chemical, and emotional stressors, what we're able to do is remove those stressors off the body. And what the body's set point is normalization. Okay. So what does that mean again? Is that, like, let's say, if I hit my head on my desk here and split this open, that's not the cause of the problem. It's a result of me hitting my head. And what do I need to do is understand and figure, like, picture that I don't even know how I hit my head. Like, I didn't even know I was, and I did. And I got to find out, how am I hitting my head so I can stop. And ultimately, when you stop doing that, your body's able to start to repair that, because you're avoiding hitting it again and again and again. And that's what happens a lot of times with the stress response on the body, physical, chemical, and emotional, is that if you don't know how you're stressing your body, then you keep triggering it. So we've got to remove those triggers, and automatically your body already starts to move back towards normal. Because people have been hitting their heads, they've been adapting to these stressors. You can have organ, cell, and tissue damage, right? And so that's why we're evaluating through functional medicine too, is we're looking at what's the cellular changes, the organ changes, the dysfunctions that are there that need to be supported through foods and supplementation. So that's where these come in. So what are we doing is we're removing the stressors off the body. We're removing the triggers. We're addressing the areas of dysfunction that are degenerated, that are damaged, and basically using foods, and then hyper nutrition called supplementation, because we've definitely in a world now where we've evaluated different foods and the different medicinal properties of these foods, and you can distill those into liquids and tinctures and supplements, and you just got to have high quality supplements at the right dosages to address these different dysfunctions. And so I do that through foods, and then also supplementation. We have to look at other lifestyle factors that, maybe think of exercise again. If you're a person who is not moving at all, very sedentary, that's got to change. You could be on the other end of the spectrum and be a woman who's extremely like in the gym all the time, cranking all the time. That might be a stressor for you too. So you got to be careful. You got to understand where you're at through the testing to determine what's the best thing for you, because that's a big truth too, is that there's no one size fits all care. We all need to have individualized care. And that's what functional medicine and what I do every single day, it allows us to do, is individual approaches. So we've got to look at some of those lifestyle factors. We've got to look at those stressors. Sometimes we really got to look at those jobs. Sometimes there needs to be job changes or position changes, because it's not healthy for you. So these are some of the lifestyle things that we start to address. If you have sleep issues, sleep is another one that might need a lot of supplementation, because if you can't sleep well, it's definitely one of those symptoms that is related to hormones. But if you can't sleep well, then you're gonna have a hard time repairing. And so you could have a lot of supplementation towards that hyper nutrition, to try to make sure that this sleeping is taking place. What else? The gut, because we talked about the gut, that there's so many things that can happen within that gut and that immune system, that you can have a lot of different toxicity factors, including those stealth infections. Those stealth infections need to be addressed. I choose to address them with antimicrobials, not antibiotics. Antibiotics is kind of like an atom bomb that kills off everything. And we have we have tons of bacteria that is supposed to be in there, that is beneficial. And so when you use those antibiotics, it can destroy those guys as well. Don't get me wrong, there's always a time and place for antibiotics, but I see a lot of usage of antibiotics for things that aren't that extreme. Okay. So there's a lot of perspective, and that's some of the things that I probably talk more about in other lives, and upcoming what am I trying to say? Upcoming podcasts, okay? Because I'm going to be doing podcasts. So how do we address those? Is through these lifestyle factors, the individual testing, to look at the areas of what's triggering, what are the areas that are dysfunctional, what are the organ cells and tissues that have become degenerated and dysfunctional, how do we support them naturally, holistically. And just because hormones are part of the problem doesn't mean that they're the whole problem. So you got to address the upstream factors. When you're doing that, you can bank on the fact that your body wants to normalize. If you stop hitting your head, this seals up. If you're out in the heat and you're sweating and you come back in the house and it's cool, you will cool back down, right? If it's cold outside and you stay out there, you're going to continue to freeze. If you walk back into the house, you'll warm back up, right? So your body wants that homeostasis is what it's called. And so I want to encourage you to believe in that, okay? I bank on that every single day, that your body should be normalizing. And if it's not, what else is triggering it? Do we need more time? What else do we need to test? And so hopefully you've gained some insight here again, guys. We've talked about, and I'll post this. The major questions was how do you test for hormones, and what's different really, and how is your testing different from other testing that you've probably done or haven't done, and then what do you do to basically take care of the problems. And I'm giving some insight on that. So I planned on doing about 15 minutes, and I've doubled that. So we're at 30 minutes now. I hope you're getting something out of this. And what I want you to be aware of too is that I'll be doing these live Q&As every Wednesday. Still trying to narrow down a time that you can count on, and basically call it a live Q&A show every Wednesday. Also want to make you aware that I am doing my Road to Wellness Masterclass here at in an hour and a half at 6 o'clock here Mountain Standard Time. And my Road to Wellness Masterclass is a deep dive into understanding functional medicine. But really what I say is helping you become your own doctor. Okay, because ultimately who's responsible for your health? You are. So who has to become your doctor? You do. So what does that mean is that you have to understand the ins and outs of medicine, the ins and outs of functional medicine, the lifestyle factors, what's good, what's bad. And so you're able to work within that environment to make the choices and the changes that are necessary for your body. And so I'm going to go in depth into this class. It's usually about 2 hours long, that we're going to go deep dive into this, so you'll understand these factors, so you don't keep being stuck in the same medical approach, getting the same results, that you can not be like everybody else and prevent and avoid major diagnoses and diseases, or if you are in those scenarios, understand how to test and climb your way back out of them, and ultimately become your own doctor. I always call it like liberating your health freedoms, that you do not want to be a prisoner to your own body. I've been there. I was disabled at 19 years old. My wife was a prisoner of her body with major immune system reactions and skin irritations for about 3 years. Okay. And so I know what it's like to be a prisoner to your body, and I don't want people to be there. I feel like we've definitely been proven to help people to change the way they view and manage their health, and give them the tools, the clarity to climb themselves back to optimization and health, and have their health freedoms and live the life that they were created to have. So